Today we're going to look at, next 20 minutes, the modern digital patient journey. So AI is an important part of this, but we're going to go back to the consumer, the patient, and the emotional and physical drivers of seeking health care. So 4 concepts I want to get across today. I want to talk a little bit about the empowered health consumer, and this has really escalated in the last 4 years or so. The modern digital patient journey, what's the journey they're taking from a digital perspective? How do we create meaningful engagement to generate what we call at Hello Buxy, high-value actions? So education is fine, awareness is fine. If they don't take action, then they don't benefit, and commercially we don't benefit as a pharma and consumer health industry. And finally, the convergence of the consumer and the HCP. These are 2 separate journeys. They come together, and it's important we understand how that works. So the old world, it wasn't that long ago that health information sources were somewhat limited. Here in Vietnam and many parts of Asia, limited access to credible health information, not localized, both in terms of language and also cultural context, and knowledge was primarily held by doctors. And we saw an imbalance in the relationship between patients and their doctor. Doctors held the power, and communication was one way. It was doctor to patient. At the same time, consumers were quite reactive in the way they were dealing with health. When a problem arose, they dealt with it. Prevention was not really that common. This is a survey we did 4 years ago as part of our ongoing market research into consumer trends. In 2019, we looked at what percentage of consumers believe that diabetes is curable. 83% across Asia. I've just highlighted 3 countries here, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. An incredibly high level of misunderstanding. Now, this has changed a lot. We've redone this survey in the last 2 years and then in the last month, and a significant improvement in understanding and knowledge across all the markets. So things have changed a lot, probably driven by 2 mega trends. One is GDP growth. So GDP has doubled between 2014 and 2024. So by next year, it would have doubled across the markets in which we operate. That makes healthcare much more accessible in terms of affordability. Internet penetration has also doubled. So access to information, access to tools and resources. We know in Vietnam it's much higher than 60%. I think we're up at about 74%. So we're now in a new world of digitally empowered consumers, and health sits within that context. At the same time, people's mindsets have also shifted from that reactive approach to health to very much a proactive approach to health. They can afford it and have access to the information that helps them understand what to do. And this balance of power has now leveled out. It's very much an equal relationship between the doctor and the patient. It's a 2-way conversation. And we predict it'll tilt. It'll tilt in favor of the patient. The patient will drive this relationship. The patient will demand more and more from their healthcare professional. And we see this here in Vietnam, the rise of the empowered health consumer. Vietnamese seek a sense of control through online platforms. 71% of Vietnamese consumers say that they'll go online first. It's the very first thing they will do for both reactive and preventative healthcare. So, we asked this question to our Vietnamese consumers about 8 months ago. I'm going to ask you guys now. What do you think are Vietnamese consumers' most trusted sources of health information? We gave them 10 options. Interesting. Okay. Number 1, pharmacists. Number 2, doctors. Number 3, equal with doctors, health and medical websites. And the others go down from there. So this is what Vietnamese consumers told us. And I've intentionally shown the 9 markets that we surveyed. So this is 11,000 respondents. It's a very large-scale survey. You can see Vietnam running across the top there. So number 1, doctors. Number 2, health and medical websites. Number 3, pharmacists. And look how consistent it is across the region. Every country more or less gave the same answer. So doctors, no surprise there. But health and medical websites, as the second most trusted source of information, is a really important point. It's ahead of pharmacists. What does that tell us? It tells us that patients are driving their care through online research. We know that health starts with search. And this new type of patient is emerging, this proactive patient, actively engaged in treatment decisions, actively engaged in preventative care, actively engaged in discussions with their doctor from an informed position. And they have access to more resources than ever before. On the right-hand side there is a survey, not done by us, it was done by a consultancy firm. They asked patients about their engagement with their healthcare professional and the relationship with their online search. 50% of patients across Asia, and this included Vietnam, will ask a doctor about a specific medication that they've read about online. 40% will suggest a diagnosis, and 40% believe they will only get good care from their doctor if they've done their own research first. So an incredibly high belief that they've got to do their own research, they've got to go to the doctor very well prepared for the consultation. So for everybody in this room, and certainly for the team at Hello Baxi, this is what fuels what we do every day. How do we get the right content into the hands of these consumers so they have an informed conversation with their doctor, using the right information, the information that we would like them to be discussing with their doctor. And I don't expect you to read this. This has given rise to what we call the modern digital patient journey. Across the top there are a series of steps that consumers and patients will typically take before they see a doctor. So they've got a symptom. There's a symptom onset. What's the first thing they do? Research on health and medical websites. Quickly followed by probably doing a symptom checker, a risk screener, some sort of call to action. They'll then get a recommendation from that screener, that tool, an app or a chatbot, and then they'll check the online provider network. They'll look at hospital and doctor ratings to make a doctor selection. They'll book an appointment. They probably get reminders. And they'll often search in communities or blogs to understand what should I discuss with my doctor, what questions should I ask. All of that happens before they see the doctor. Then they see the doctor. First thing they do is research again, online websites. What did the doctor tell me? I didn't quite understand that. What is that diagnosis? What is that condition? And what are my treatment options? I don't entirely trust that the doctor has given me the best treatment. I'm going to double check. So again, a series of digital touch points, all of which we need to be involved in to ensure they're getting the right content. Then there's treatment choice, and they start taking their treatment. Maybe there's an app that tracks their daily activity, their symptoms, their health parameters, their food intake. Maybe there's an app that gives them pill reminders, prescription renewal reminders. Maybe it tracks their symptoms. Again, a series of digital touch points. And finally, long-term disease management. It can go a number of ways, but just to call out a couple, self-monitoring apps, or perhaps sharing success stories in communities. So they're just the digital touch points, but I think you'd all agree with me that consumer journeys don't look as linear as what I just showed. These are the digital touch points. The reality is that consumer journeys come in all shapes and all sizes. And it's really driven by this, that consumers cut across races, ages, socioeconomic groups, and all of their health queries are very, very personal. Top left, a woman for herself. Is this normal? How do I find a trusted gynecologist? That's a search query. A mum, when is her next vaccination due? Maybe a caregiver, should my mum change her diet? What should I be looking out for? These are typical search queries at different points in that journey, some at the beginning, the middle, some at the end, and they're all very personal. So these sort of consumer journeys are discovered. They're not created. We don't create journeys. We find out what the journey is. We discover the journey. And we always find they don't travel down a linear path. They don't go in the direction we all expected. So here's a diabetes, what we call a patient experience map. It's a journey, but it's a little bit more than that. So in the middle there, that's not a very linear journey. They might go round in circles, might go forwards, backwards, but importantly, the key points here are, what are those sort of chunkable phases of a journey? At a very simplistic level, pre-diagnosis, diagnosis, then treatment, for example. But this is where it gets really exciting, is what's the emotional experience? What's that roller coaster of positive and negative emotions, which often generate search queries? They're often looking for support. What are the pain points? What are they thinking? And often this results in search queries. And thus, what are the opportunities? What are those touch points? Digital touch points, offline touch points. So this is what we have to understand. And it's what we call identifying those critical moments of care. So across that journey, and this is a consumer health example, a multitude of different searches for information, support, advice. They can be delivered through content and tools and screeners and the like. And this tells us it's about intent. When someone searches or engages with content, they have intent. So these are intent indicators. And that means we then serve them. We, as the pharma industry, the consumer health industry, will serve content that adds real relevance, it adds value to their lives. It's naturally discovered, it's not forced upon them, and it becomes desired content because we understand the journey, we understand the needs and the pain points and how we can best serve that. So that's all well and good, and that sort of describes the awareness, educational piece, but it all sort of comes to naught if we don't engage and drive action. So how do we drive engagement and action? It's all about driving an aware, educated consumer or patient into the next stage in the journey. What are those critical high-value actions we need them to take to push them through the journey to get to the point of maybe buying the appropriate product, consulting a pharmacist, seeing a doctor, whatever the end point is in the journey. But we know there's a range of personas. We know that they're coming to us with all different personalities and situations and expectations. We did a survey that asked consumers, imagine you've just done a risk screener online. It alerts you to the fact that you could have a disease. You could be at risk of a disease. What would you do next? Now, 83% said they would take action. So the vast majority of consumers and patients, when they're alerted to the risk of something, will take action. Now, these are examples of high-value actions. There's 11 high-value actions there. Look at Vietnam, second from the left. The top three high-value actions that a consumer will take in Vietnam is to read more about it. So they're not going to rush off to the doctor after a risk screener. The first thing they do is read more on online websites. Then they may walk into the nearest doctor or clinic, and they may read more about it in blogs, forums, or communities. So they're the top 3 actions that Vietnamese consumers will take as a consequence of realizing they may be at risk of something. And it goes on from there. Some will make bookings via online booking tools, but in Vietnam that is around about 24%. So we must serve a series of solutions that allows all types of consumers and patients to take a range of different actions that gets them through their health journey. Which leads me to the first of 2 product solutions that I'd like to share with you today that we've developed this year. The first one is what we call CarePath Connect. And this is designed specifically to activate patients and consumers into those high-value actions. So we've got awareness, we've got education. How do we activate them in a very personal, relevant way at the right point in their journey with the right language that they need to hear, that recognizes their pain points and their journey so far, and push them into high-value actions. It may be engaging with a chatbot that's personalized to their requirements. It may be completing a risk screener, locating a doctor, booking a doctor, having a telemedicine appointment, having some sort of counseling, maybe some home delivery. So these are all high-value actions that convert awareness and education into a meaningful outcome. And of course, it sits within a bigger ecosystem. So most of the people in this room will probably have a consumer or patient-facing website as part of your mix and the way you communicate with your end user. And you're probably paying to drive traffic to that website. It's an educational platform, and we push traffic through social ads and paid media to build awareness and education. CarePath Connect then picks up from there and drives these high-value actions to ensure that as many of the aware and educated population then take some sort of meaningful action. And then we complement it with our own organic traffic. So our active users, our social media followers, our registered users, our community members, to drive additional activated consumers or patients into CarePath Connect. And of course, anyone who drops out, people who don't take an action, get retargeted. So this is all built off an understanding of the journey for a specific consumer, a specific patient, coping with a specific health issue, recognizing their personality, the stage in the journey they're at, the search queries they're using, to serve them a relevant series of calls to action that drives them through the rest of their journey, with an improved health outcome and an improved commercial outcome. And that gets me to the final point I wanted to deliver today, which is the convergence of the consumer and the doctor. These are two separate journeys, but they come together. So we know that with the patients or consumers, we're raising disease awareness, we're driving undiagnosed patients in to see their doctor, or we're driving them to a pharmacy. And there's a consultation, there's a diagnosis, there's a treatment. Now on the doctor side, what they desperately need and what they don't have time for is help with patient education and adherence. However, we know the rules of engagement with doctors have changed in the last 2 to 3 years. So how do we get that content to the doctor? We know that push communications are much, much less effective than they used to be. The EDAs, the EDMs, and all the things that pharma companies and some consumer health companies are doing with doctors. And what's really taken off in the last couple of years is what we call pull communications. This is content that's demanded by the doctor. So it's the webinars, it's the CME programs, because these are delivering the content that doctors want. There was a survey done amongst Asian doctors and other parts of the world that asked doctors, what is the best piece of content you've received recently from a pharma company? And the answer was, a piece of content I could pass directly on to my patient to help them. So doctors most value content that helps them communicate with their patients. That's the #1 most important piece of content that a pharma company or a consumer health company could give to a doctor. However, there are challenges. Accessing doctors is increasingly more difficult. They're spending less time with sales reps. Sales reps are expensive. There's less time for email. We've now got open rates of only 2.5% from EDMs going to doctors. Webinars have limited reach, and they're quite expensive to run. And identifying the preferences of doctors and then synchronizing our efforts has become increasingly challenging. So the right is what pharma thinks doctors value, on the left is what doctors actually value. And 82% of doctors consider global independent medical websites as a critical source of their daily content, here in Vietnam as well. Which then caused us to think a little bit about, can we have a product solution that helps to close that gap? So this solution we partnered with another organization. So we formed an exclusive partnership across Asia with a company called DocAir, who are providing Asia's first and only global network of doctor-only platforms for display advertising. What this means is when Vietnamese doctors go onto global platforms like the Lancet, the British Medical Journal, the American Journal of Dermatology, any of these global publications where they go for their educational content, we can now serve a branded piece of communication in that environment. So, for example, this is a campaign we ran with Abbott across 6 countries, and they've got a dengue test kit, and you can see in Medscape and the British Medical Journal and Lancet and Journal of Infectious Diseases, banner advertising in a contextually relevant environment, very, very targeted, only to doctors from the target countries who are landing on these global platforms. So we felt really excited by this, excited enough to form this regional partnership and to bring it to Vietnam. So we now have the largest aggregator of all the places that doctors go for their content from an extensive provider network. So sitting behind all those logos on the right-hand side are many, many, many medical journals, the Lancet, the British Medical Journal, and so on, covering all specialties with a reach of about 60 to 90%. And here in Vietnam, these are the top 20 specialists in Vietnam, a pretty decent reach, about 15,000 GPs or family medicine physicians, 2,000 general surgeons, 19,000 pharmacists, 4,000 dentists. So this is the reach of Vietnamese doctors going on a regular basis to these global platforms for their content, where we can serve branded pharmaceutical advertising. And we know their doctors, we can target them precisely by specialty, by geography, and by keywords. So I can target Vietnamese dermatologists from Ho Chi Minh City who are going to these global platforms, and I can serve a specific ad from a Vietnamese pharmaceutical company. The usual KPIs around reach and frequency, but what's very interesting on the right-hand side is we can do a pre and post brand lift study, which tells us not only ad recall and brand awareness, but prescription intent. So that's super exciting. What is your intent to prescribe this product before the campaign? We run the campaign for 3 months, and we measure their prescription intent after the campaign. So very, very measurable. They're only doctors. We know that for a fact because these are logged-in platforms. And we've had some great success with a range of client partners. So you can see Novartis, Bayer, Pfizer, GSK. And all of these are pharmaceutical products. There's pharma products, there's vaccines in there that have conducted programs with this solution. Okay, so that brings me to the end of my section. So we've talked about the rise of the empowered health consumer. We've talked about the digital patient journey, how we generate these high-value actions, and how we consider the convergence of the doctor and patient journey.